Karen, what's going on with HUD guidelines for duplication of benefits? Look at that. Had a few minutes before we got asked. So here we go. Karen, good news is law's been changed. All right. So the law today has been changed. It allows for this to happen. Under the law, and this was from the very beginning because we had to go through and pre-negotiate this, the way that it works is that the governor has to send a waiver request to the president. I literally was at the White House when the president signed the bill into law. I sent a text message to the governor. The governor then sent a waiver request to the White House within probably 20 minutes of the bill being signed into law. So that starts the 45-day clock. So that means that next week will be the 45-day window closes. So I have been on the phone with White House officials, with Office of Management and Budget officials, with Housing and Urban Development officials. We're pushing them to get this thing done as quick as possible. One thing, and this is kind of inside baseball, but the reality is, there are a number of people within the federal family, and I'm going to go ahead and call them the deep state. I'll just use quotes. If ever there was, we're seeing it right now. There are people within the federal agencies that are very much opposed to what we're doing. They were opposing it during the Obama administration. They're opposing it during this one, which is one of the reasons why we actually had to change the law as opposed to just get a policy change. So we had to basically roll them. We had to change the law and force this change on them. So they have some folks that are sort of institutional obstacles that are trying to push back and prevent this from happening. The law says what it says. Under the law, Renee, by the end of next week, they have to make their decision, which if you read the law effectively says, notwithstanding any other provision, the president cannot determine that a loan and a grant are duplicative of one another. So we don't believe the White House has any discretion to exercise. We believe the law is clear that they have to approve it. They're just trying to get the right guidelines in place. But Renee, we're going to continue to stay on and make sure this is done. What's happened? Duplication of benefits waiver. What happens if it isn't signed within the 45 days? So Mandy, look, that's possible, I guess. Under the law, I don't believe it's legal, but under the law, they have 45 days to make a decision. As I mentioned earlier on duplication of benefits, you've got a number of people within the federal agencies that have fought us on this change in the law all along. We rolled them. We got it done anyway. And so I believe that there are these bureaucrats that are fighting us and trying to thwart this. Ultimately, I think we're going to prevail. You know, some of the options, number one, if they don't sign it, we can continue to have meetings with White House and with HUD and other agencies that are where there are some of the problems. Number two, and something I'm not going to take off the table, would be legal action, mandamus or other things. But ultimately, I think the law is crystal clear. I do not think they have the flexibility to reject the waiver. So we're just going to keep working. I actually had some discussions today about this with both members of Congress and with agency officials, and so we're going to keep working on that. Debbie, any word on SBA yet? Linda, I answered that a few minutes ago. Both the Beard and the SBA, but I'll repeat the SBA. Under the law, the president has until the end of next week to actually grant the waiver. We know that there's some people within the federal agencies that are trying to resist this change or this policy, but we think the law is crystal clear. So we have had numerous conference calls and meetings with White House and agency officials. We are continuing to push them on this. And I'll tell you, anybody that tries to obstruct this, I think, is acting in an illegal manner. And so we will be looking at any option that is available to us if they do continue to push back or resist implementing this law. But I'll say it again. Under the law, the president has until the end of next week to grant the waiver that then would allow Restore program to cut you checks. Melissa, I was denied because of the SBA. So if I do get the money from Restore, will it be in the SBA name as well in the grant? Money from Restore based on income, or who gets the award money? Melissa, based on the waiver request that the governor submitted to the White House, it does appear that it would be a co-written check, meaning to you and to the SBA. That is how the governor requested the waiver. If you contact our office, we're happy to share that letter with you, but that the governor sent to the White House. But that is how the waiver request was submitted. Cindy, I-12 dam. Cindy, as part of the disaster bill, that law was changed, and it does require Federal Highway Administration and FEMA to get together to develop standards for how that road should be built. So effectively, new engineering standards, new drainage standards, that is in the disaster law that fix duplication of benefits and other things. So we're going to be working with Federal Highway Administration and FEMA to implement that. We've asked the state to come in and make changes, and they so far have resisted. So we're working it from the federal level because it is an interstate, and so we did change that law. Barb, how much is the administration cost for the whole Restore program? When are these costs available for taxpayers to find out? Barb, don't quote me on this, but as I recall, the contract that was given out, and I want to be clear, this is just the contract that would be paid to private contractors. That does not include the amount that state employees may be paid. I think that the private contract alone was $250 million. The total program is $1.7 billion. For some reason, I think they were limiting the allocation to disaster victims to $1.2 billion, which means that there's $250 million in there. I don't remember what they were doing with that. Actually, I think some of it was being used to pay a federal match. But regardless, think about that for just a minute. Being paid $250 million plus whatever public employees are being paid to give out $1.2 billion. I mean, that's crazy to me. In fact, somebody even told me it was closer to $300 million, but whatever it was. I'd do it for $249. I'm sure you would too. That's insane. I mean, it really is. That is insane because every penny we pay to them is money that is not going to disaster victims. So we are working on legislation literally right now. I was working on it this morning to try to totally revamp this program to where it is a much more efficient program where money gets to flood victims faster. Here we are more than 2 years after the flood, and I think they still have $1 billion in the bank out of $1.7 billion. The amount of money that's going toward contracting and administration, going toward studies and reviews and other things, I think is just, it's not defendable. And so we are working on legislation to totally revamp that program.